Hey there, welcome to episode 4 of altering the Royal Regiment of Scotland kilt. Now, when we last spoke, or when I last spoke, um, remember I was sharing my plan with you. I had not yet reduced the top because you want to do all of your manipulating and flipping back and forth and chalking and thinking while you have integrity on the seams. So at the end of the session, I decided that I was going to rob 3 pleats from either side, and that was to give myself extra cloth to make a deep pleat, an apron pleat, and principally because, remember, I didn't want to touch this apron at all because we're bound by the Black Watch rosettes, and they have to be centered on the black line, and they have to be, let's just say, this much in. They have to be inside of the edge of the kilt. They can't be right up against it because it would look silly. So I was looking at these dimensions, and then I decided if I subtracted 3 from either side, that the dimensions would work. The width of the pleats versus the width of the apron would work fine. I unpicked 2 of the seams on either side, and or 3 of the seams on either side, and started to play with it, and then discovered that we have this expression that no plan survives contact with the enemy in this case being reality, because although sure it reduced the width across the pleats to be compatible with the apron, it also created a bit of a monster in that the apron pleat would be more than half. The apron pleat would come to about here, which would look silly. I mean, you can't see it from the outside, but the owner would see it when you take it off, and frankly, it would feel a bit odd too. So I racked my brain a little bit, and there's 2 options. I mean, because I absolutely refused to remove cloth, because we're setting this kilt up for life, and we have to think of this client's figure as he ages and his figure coarsens. And generally, the rule of thumb that I've found is that the hip measurement, in this case 39 inches, he has a 32 waist, God help us, but his hip measurement is 39, and that is a pretty good indicator of what his waist is going to be like 30, 40 years from now, right? So I can't remove cloth because eventually that cloth is going to be needed. It's going to be put on. And we're not going to play that, oh, he'll grow into it thing, because that's just nonsense. So what I've done is I've backed up a little bit. Now I'm only robbing 2 pleats from either side. And to deal with that extra amount of cloth, because if I folded this now, it would still be about 50%. But what I'm going to do is on the inner apron, this was the center of the inner apron. I'm moving the center of the inner apron over half of the set, because the inner apron doesn't have to match the outside apron. So I've moved it to the right. What's that? 4 inches, and that'll accommodate for cloth. It'll reduce this to an acceptable 1/3 of the total width, and the extra cloth in the other side I'm going to deal with by just making this end a bit deeper. Now, once again, as we see, they've used iron fusible interfacing, but I like this detail that they've done, where they folded it in. I don't know if you can see it. See how they folded that in? I quite like that. I might actually adopt that. I'll certainly do it when I reach this stage in the kilt, in this particular kilt. But that's a nice little feature. I've never seen that before, and I rather like it. So there we are, dealing with the inner apron by moving. I've moved it over half a set, and which reduces the hidden pleat to a manageable size, and it also means the cloth is there against future growth, shall we say. And then the same thing or a similar thing on the outer apron, where this was the center, and you can see the creases still there. That was the center. In this case, I'm going to move a full repeat. So this is going to be the new center of the apron, which means that this is going to be my new edge, which reduces the hidden pleat to, actually wrong, there you are. It's going to reduce that apron pleat to little over a third. But then I will carefully take these rosettes off, unpick this, and again, once again, more glue, unpick this, and then this will be the new center of the apron with a manageable deep pleat, which is appropriate, and frankly, a better fold on the outer edge of the pleat, or outer edge of the apron, because it'll be deeper, and therefore it's going to provide a little more weight to keep that. I mean, it's heavy enough. It's wonderful cloth, but it'll provide a little more weight on the outside edge to prevent the thing from flipping up in the wind. So there we are. Oh, one last thing. You'll notice on the two, what are now the two outside pleats, that I've basted them down, because when I remake this, I'm going to press as soon as this video is over. I'm going to take it over to the pressing table that you see over there and iron all of these old creases out of it. I'm going to press these two pleats so that they become knife pleats. So this on the right hip, this will be a knife pleat pointing towards the back of the kilt. And on the left hip, this will be a knife pleat pointing in this direction. The reason why I do this is because I'm used to I started working with kilts in the 70s and 80s that were 30, 40, 50 years old even then. And I discovered, because nobody expected these kilts to last this long, but I found that these military box pleated kilts, the two outermost box pleats had sort of they'd lost one crease, and basically they turned themselves into knife pleats again. So that was the effect of long wear. And then a few years later, let's say mid to 80s to early 90s, I started seeing more recent construction. I think the Queensland Highlanders gifted my regiment quite a few kilts, and I noticed that these kilts of more recent construction had been sewn so that the two end pleats were knife pleats. So somebody, I wasn't the only one to notice this. Somebody in the QM noticed this and started making the kilts that way themselves. So I'm going to do this modification right now. I'm going to press that so that those are knife pleats, because it's going to keep them looking sharper for longer. And there we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over to the pressing table. I'm going to press all of these creases out up into this line. Any marks that I desire to keep, I'm just going to do a back stitch with a piece of white thread, because my iron, of course, is going to remove the shock. Then I'll unpick these, press that as flat as well, and then when I come back, I'm going to start sewing the pleats, resewing the fell, because you can see here's my projected bottom of the fell, like so. I'm going to hand sew these, but with each of these, I'm going to hand sew them all the way to the top, because now that I've cut that off, this seam, see it? That seam is going to start to come apart. So I could sew this part and then sew this separately, but it's not that much slower for me just to sew the whole thing by hand, top to bottom. And that gives me the assurance that he's not going to come back months or maybe years from now because the top of his kilt has decided to turn back into a kit. So there we go. Ironing, quite a bit of sewing, and then I think I'll report back in with you when I've actually got some progress behind me. And we'll carry on from there. Thank you.